Be me, Beatrice, 26, working as a grant coordinator for a nonprofit environmental organization. Living my best life, fighting the patriarchy one microaggression at a time. Just got home from another exhausting day of correcting male colleagues who think they can interrupt me in meetings. Settle down with my fair trade herbal tea to scroll through Instagram. Immediately notice something that makes my blood pressure spike. Orion posted a photo, and I can see Chad in the background. My ex-boyfriend Chad, who I graciously spent 2 years educating about social justice. The ungrateful man-child who threw away our beautiful relationship just because I expected basic accountability. Orion's wearing what looks like an orange jumpsuit. Caption reads, "Freedom never tasted so sweet. Hashtag Chad is free. Hashtag breakout party." My hands start shaking as I swipe through more photos. There's an entire album of Chad's toxic friend group all wearing matching orange prison uniforms. They're posing with drinks and laughing like complete Neanderthals. One photo shows a cake decorated to look like broken chains. Another shows a massive banner hanging in Orion's backyard that says, "Chad is free," in big block letters. I can feel my heart racing as the realization hits me. These absolute troglodytes threw Chad a freedom party to celebrate our breakup. They're literally comparing our relationship to imprisonment. The audacity is beyond comprehension. Screenshot every single photo with trembling fingers. Need to document this misogynistic harassment for evidence. Immediately open my text messages and start typing furiously to Chad. I cannot believe what I'm seeing right now. Your disgusting friends threw you a freedom party? You're all celebrating the end of our relationship like I was some kind of prison warden? Send it immediately, then keep typing. Do you realize how absolutely vile this is? You're all acting like basic accountability and growth was torture. I spent 2 years trying to help you become a better person, and this is how you repay me? The rage is building exponentially as I think about everything I did for him. Remember how patient I was when he would mansplain the most basic concepts to me. Like the time he tried to explain how my own menstrual cup worked. Or when he attempted to correct me about feminist literature I'd been studying since college. I literally had to implement a system where he counted to 10 before responding to anything I said, just to give him time to consider whether he was about to mansplain. Send another text. You know what the most pathetic part is? I actually believed you when you said you understood why problematic behavior needed to be called out, but clearly you were just pretending to grow. Keep scrolling through the photos while typing. See one of Orion making some kind of toast with all the guys gathered around. They're all holding beer bottles up in the air like they're celebrating some great victory. The disrespect is absolutely staggering. These are grown men acting like teenagers who just got out of detention. Remember how hard I worked to expand Chad's social consciousness. Every Tuesday evening we had our feminist theory discussion group. I curated the most accessible readings for him and his male friends. Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, Kimbrel Crenshaw. Simplified concepts that should be basic human understanding. Created safe spaces for them to unpack their internalized misogyny. And what did I get in return? Eye rolls when I corrected their language. Sighs when I reminded them to check their privilege before sharing opinions. Chad would always act like asking him to acknowledge his advantages as a straight white man was some impossible burden. Type another message. I'm forwarding these photos to everyone we know so they can see exactly what kind of person you really are. This level of disrespect won't go unanswered. Actually do forward the screenshots to my entire contact list with a lengthy explanation. Hey everyone, just wanted to share what toxic masculinity looks like in 2024. These men threw my ex a freedom party because he couldn't handle being in a relationship with someone who expected basic emotional maturity and social awareness. Add crying emoji and broken heart emoji for effect. Send it to my book club, my yoga class group chat, my coworkers, and my college friends. Look through Orion's album again to see if I missed anything particularly egregious. Find a video of Orion actually giving the toast. Press play and immediately want to throw my phone across the room. To my boy Chad, who spent 2 years in relationship prison, Orion says while grinning, "No more having to ask permission to see your boys. No more daily apologies for existing as a man. No more 3-hour lectures about sitting with your legs slightly apart on the subway." The other guys all cheer and clink their bottles together. Chad is finally free to have opinions again, without writing a dissertation about his privilege first. More cheering and laughter. My vision literally starts to get blurry from pure rage. These absolute Neanderthals are making me sound like some kind of controlling monster, when all I ever did was try to help Chad recognize his unconscious biases. The permission thing was completely reasonable. I just asked him to check with me before making plans with friends because healthy relationships require communication. And yes, I preferred when he included me in social gatherings because his friend group desperately needed female perspective. They would sit around making casual rape jokes and using problematic language. Someone needed to create accountability in those spaces. The daily apologies weren't for existing as a man. They were acknowledgement exercises to help him recognize his inherent advantages. Every morning, I would have him name one way his male privilege benefited him. It was supposed to build awareness and empathy. Apparently, he was too immature to understand the educational value. And the man-spreading criticism was completely valid. He would sprawl across entire subway benches while women stood holding babies. The selfishness was breathtaking. I was simply asking him to be mindful of the space he occupied in public. Send Chad another furious text. Your friend Orion's little speech just proves how absolutely toxic your entire social circle is, making fun of basic human decency and respect. This is exactly why I tried to help you see beyond your narrow worldview. Realize my hands are literally shaking with anger. Take several deep breaths and try to center myself. Remember the mindfulness techniques from my meditation app. But then I keep scrolling and see even more photos. Chad looking genuinely happy for the first time in months. Laughing with his friends like he doesn't have a care in the world. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here alone dealing with the emotional labor of processing this betrayal. See a photo of him taking a huge bite of that ridiculous chain cake. He's smiling so wide it's actually painful to look at. After everything I did to help him grow as a person, all the patience I showed when he would interrupt me mid-sentence, all the gentle corrections when he would dominate conversations, the careful way I explained why certain topics required his silence so marginalized voices could be heard. Remember the weekly discussion groups I organized? Spent hours every week preparing discussion questions about patriarchal systems. Created reading guides to help the men understand concepts like emotional labor and internalized misogyny. Bought snacks and set up my entire living room to accommodate their learning process. And they treated it like some kind of punishment. Would show up late, clearly not having done the reading. Chad would always make these passive-aggressive comments about assigned homework, like learning about systemic oppression was some kind of burden instead of basic civic duty. Send another text to Chad. I'm genuinely concerned about your mental health if you think celebrating the end of our relationship is healthy behavior. This kind of toxic masculinity celebration is exactly what I was trying to help you recognize and overcome. Decide to scroll through more of the photos to fully document this harassment. Find one of Chad's co-worker Marcus, wearing a prison uniform with escaped convict written across the back. Another one shows them all doing some kind of mock prison break pose by a cardboard wall. The level of coordination that went into this misogynistic display is actually shocking. They clearly spent significant time and money planning this attack on my character. Think back to how reasonable my expectations actually were. When I asked Chad to acknowledge his privilege before sharing opinions, that wasn't censorship. It was basic awareness building. Like when he wanted to explain why the wage gap isn't really that simple. I asked him to first acknowledge that, as a man, he hadn't personally experienced workplace discrimination. Seems pretty basic to me, but he would get this frustrated look, like I was asking him to solve calculus. Sometimes he would just sit there silent for minutes trying to figure out the right way to phrase his privilege acknowledgement, which honestly showed he was starting to internalize the lessons. Or when I corrected his mansplaining. Every time he would start explaining something I obviously already knew, I would gently say that sounds like mansplaining, and ask him to reconsider whether his input was actually needed. This was especially important when we were with my female friends. He had this unconscious habit of dominating conversations about topics like reproductive rights, areas where his voice was literally unnecessary and actively harmful. I was teaching him to recognize when his participation was unwelcome. See another photo of Orion and Marcus doing some kind of elaborate handshake while wearing their prison costumes. They're both grinning like absolute fools. Caption says, "The warden can't stop us now." I am quite literally the warden in this scenario. They're comparing me to an authority figure who controls prisoners. This is actually a form of harassment, and I should probably document it for legal purposes. Send Chad another text. The fact that your friends are calling me a warden shows exactly how much internalized misogyny your entire social circle has. You're all threatened by women who expect accountability. I realize I should probably call my therapist, Dr. Patricia, about this. She's been helping me work through the emotional labor of educating men about feminism. This betrayal is definitely going to require professional processing. Keep looking through the photos and notice something that makes me even angrier. Chad's wearing a t-shirt that says recently paroled. The absolute audacity of comparing our relationship to incarceration, when all I did was create healthy boundaries and expectations. Like asking him not to make plans with friends without checking with me first. That wasn't control, it was communication. Healthy couples coordinate their social calendars. I needed to know when he would be out so I could plan my own activities accordingly. Plus, his friend group desperately needed supervision. Left to their own devices, they would spend entire evenings making problematic jokes and consuming media that reinforced toxic stereotypes. Remember the time I had to explain why going to see that new action movie without me was problematic. The film glorified violence and objectified women. I offered to find articles analyzing the harmful messaging so we could attend together and discuss it critically. But Chad just wanted to turn his brain off and watch explosions, which is exactly the kind of passive media consumption that perpetuates harmful cultural norms. I was trying to help him engage more thoughtfully with entertainment. Apparently he experienced this as oppression. Scroll back to Orion's toast video and watch it again. Need to make sure I didn't miss any particularly offensive details. "No more feminist theory homework!" Orion shouts, while the others cheer. Calling it homework, like learning about social justice, is some kind of academic burden. These are concepts that should be basic human understanding. I was literally offering free education about systems of oppression. Most people pay thousands of dollars in college courses to learn what I was teaching them in my living room. And they treated it like detention. "No more apologizing for having opinions," Orion continues, completely misrepresenting what I asked Chad to do. I never said he couldn't have opinions. I asked him to contextualize his opinions within his identity and privilege, like when he wanted to argue that affirmative action was reverse discrimination. I asked him to first acknowledge that, as a white man, he had never personally experienced systemic exclusion. This wasn't silencing him, it was teaching him to speak responsibly. Apparently, critical thinking felt like oppression to his fragile ego. Find myself getting more and more worked up as I process the full scope of this betrayal. Send Chad another text. "I'm genuinely hurt that you're allowing your friends to mock the work we did together. I thought you understood that growth requires discomfort. Clearly you weren't ready for an evolved relationship. Decide I need to document my side of the story. These photos are going to spread through social media and people might get the wrong impression. Need to create a post explaining the real situation. Open Facebook and start typing. Feeling really disappointed in humanity today. Just discovered that my ex-boyfriend's friend group threw him a freedom party to celebrate our breakup. They're literally comparing our relationship to prison because I expected basic respect and accountability. This is what toxic masculinity looks like. Men who can't handle being asked to grow and learn. Add several relevant hashtags. Hashtag toxic masculinity, hashtag emotional labor, hashtag patriarchy is not your friend, hashtag growth mindset, hashtag healthy relationships. Get a text back from Chad for the first time since I started messaging him. "Beatrice, I think you need to step back and consider why everyone in my life is celebrating right now. This isn't about disrespecting women. This is about me getting back to being myself." Read it 3 times, blood pressure rising with each pass. The absolute gaslighting in this message. He's making it sound like I somehow prevented him from being himself, when all I did was help him recognize his unconscious biases and challenge him to examine his privilege. Apparently his authentic self includes mansplaining and manspreading, which says everything about his character. Type back immediately. Getting back to being yourself? You mean getting back to interrupting women and taking up excessive space on public transportation? Getting back to making casual rape jokes with your misogynistic friend group? If that's your authentic self, then I'm glad we're done. Send it before I can second guess myself. Realize I'm crying angry tears. This whole situation is just so typical of men who can't handle being challenged. Remember how patient I was during the daily acknowledgement exercises. Every morning, I would ask Chad to name one way his male privilege had benefited him. It was supposed to be a brief mindfulness practice, like gratitude journaling but for social awareness. But he would act like it was this huge burden. Sometimes he would try to rush through it. "I'm privileged because I'm a man. Can we please just get coffee now?" Missing the entire point of the exercise. It wasn't supposed to be performative. It was supposed to build genuine awareness. Or he would try to turn it into some kind of debate. Well, technically, everyone has different types of privilege, completely deflecting from examining his own advantages. I would have to gently redirect him back to the exercise. Explain that while intersectionality is important, the focus right now was on his male privilege specifically. This wasn't about diminishing other forms of oppression. It was about him taking accountability for his own position in patriarchal systems. Get another notification that someone commented on my Facebook post. My friend Jennifer from book club wrote, "Girl, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Men really can't handle being asked to examine themselves. I feel slightly validated that at least some people understand what really happened." But then see that Chad's coworker Marcus somehow found my post and commented, "Maybe if you didn't treat your boyfriend like a prisoner, he wouldn't need a freedom party, LOL. The absolute audacity of this man, who doesn't even know me, making assumptions about my relationship based on some photos." Reply to Marcus immediately. "It's interesting that you interpret holding men accountable for their behavior as treating them like prisoners. This is exactly the kind of defensive response that prevents meaningful growth. Block him before he can respond. Don't need that kind of toxic energy in my online spaces." Scroll back through Orion's photos one more time. Notice details I missed before. There's a playlist visible on someone's phone screen with songs like Free Bird and Breaking Free. The level of coordination and planning that went into mocking our relationship. They probably spent weeks organizing this humiliation campaign, downloading prison uniform costumes, designing decorations, planning the menu around the theme. This wasn't spontaneous celebration. This was calculated harassment. See a photo of Chad cutting the chain cake while everyone cheers. He's got this huge smile on his face like he just accomplished something meaningful, instead of recognizing that he threw away a relationship with someone who genuinely cared about his development. I invested 2 years of emotional labor into helping him understand concepts like consent, culture, and intersectional feminism. Concepts that would make him a better partner for any future relationships. And he's celebrating throwing that growth opportunity away. Remember how I tried to help him recognize his manspreading behavior? The way he would sit on subway trains with his legs spread so wide that women had to stand. I started taking photos to show him how much space he was occupying. Visual evidence of his unconscious selfishness. But instead of appreciating the feedback, he would get defensive. "I'm not doing it on purpose," he would say, missing the point entirely. Unconscious oppression is still oppression. The impact matters more than the intention. I even bought him a small notebook to track his spatial awareness. Suggested he spend 1 week documenting every time he noticed himself taking up excessive space. Public transportation, restaurant tables, shared workspaces. It was supposed to build mindfulness about his physical presence. But he acted like it was some kind of surveillance system. "I feel like you're watching me constantly," he complained, when I was literally just trying to help him develop self-awareness. Get a text from my friend Sarah, who saw my Facebook post. "Babe, are you okay? Just saw the photos of Chad's party. Those men are absolutely disgusting. Do you want me to come over with wine and we can talk through this?" Feel grateful that at least some people understand how hurtful this situation is. Text her back, "Yes, please. I can't believe I wasted 2 years trying to educate someone who was apparently just pretending to listen. At least I have supportive female friends who recognize emotional labor when they see it." To decide to look through the photos one more time to see if there's anything I can report for harassment. Find a group photo where they're all pointing at the "CAD is free" banner. Everyone has these huge grins like they just rescued someone from actual imprisonment. The victimization narrative is absolutely unbelievable. I was never controlling. I was creating accountability. There's a huge difference between healthy boundaries and abuse. Asking your partner to check in before making social plans is basic relationship communication. Asking them to educate themselves about privilege is basic human decency. Notice that Chad's phone is visible in one of the photos. He's probably getting my text messages in real time, probably showing them to his toxic friend group so they can all laugh together. The thought makes me feel sick to my stomach. After everything we built together, all the growth work we did, the vulnerable conversations about dismantling patriarchal conditioning, he's turning it into entertainment for his misogynistic buddies. Send him one more text. I hope you realize that celebrating the end of our relationship like this just proves that you learned nothing from our time together. You're showing exactly why women need to demand better from men. Turn off my phone before I can see if he responds. Can't handle any more gaslighting tonight. Sarah arrives with wine and chocolate. "Honey, tell me everything," she says, settling onto my couch. Show her all the photos and explain the backstory. How I spent 2 years patiently educating Chad about feminism. How I created safe spaces for learning and growth. How I implemented systems to help him recognize his unconscious biases. How I sacrificed my own emotional well-being to support his development as an ally. The most hurtful part is that he's acting like I was somehow oppressing him, I tell Sarah, when all I did was ask for basic accountability. Sarah nods sympathetically. Men really can't handle being challenged, can they? Exactly. I was offering him free education about social justice, and he experienced it as persecution. We spend the next hour going through every photo, analyzing the misogynistic symbolism, the prison metaphors, the freedom imagery, the celebration of returning to toxic patterns. This Orion guy seems particularly awful, Sarah observes. Oh, he's the worst. He's the one who would derail our feminist theory discussions with devil's advocate arguments. Classic male behavior, right? Like we're not here to debate whether women deserve equal pay. We're here to examine how patriarchal systems function. Sarah helps me see that this whole situation actually validates everything I was trying to teach Chad. His friend group's response proves how threatened they are by women who expect growth. The elaborate nature of their celebration shows how invested they are in maintaining toxic masculinity. If my methods were actually problematic, they would have addressed it maturely. Instead, they chose public humiliation and harassment. You know what you should do? Sarah suggests. Create a response post explaining what really happened. Document your side of the story before their narrative spreads. She's absolutely right. I can't let these men control the conversation about our relationship. Need to educate people about what healthy accountability actually looks like. Spend the next hour crafting a detailed Facebook post. I've been seeing photos circulating of my ex-boyfriend's freedom party, and I think it's important to share some context. For 2 years, I invested significant emotional labor into helping Chad recognize his unconscious biases and develop as a feminist ally. I created educational opportunities through weekly discussion groups. I offered gentle corrections when he engaged in problematic behaviors like mansplaining and manspreading. I asked him to acknowledge his privilege before sharing opinions on topics that affect marginalized communities. I requested basic relationship communication like coordinating social plans. None of this was controlling or abusive. It was creating accountability and encouraging growth. The fact that his friend group is celebrating the end of these expectations with prison metaphors shows exactly why this work was necessary. Men who can't handle being asked to examine themselves will always portray accountability as oppression. This reaction proves that toxic masculinity is alive and well, and that women who demand better will always be vilified for it. Add hashtags and post it immediately. Feels slightly better having my perspective documented. At least now people can see both sides of the story. Though honestly, the photos speak for themselves. Grown men celebrating the ability to mansplain without consequences. It's actually pretty pathetic when you think about it. Sarah and I finished the wine while scrolling through responses to my post, getting supportive comments from other women who understand emotional labor. You dodged a bullet, girl. His loss, honestly. Men really hate being asked to grow. Feel validated that my friend circle recognizes good feminist praxis, but then see that somehow Chad's friends found my post. Orion commented, "Maybe next time don't try to change someone's entire personality." Marcus added, 2 years of daily apologies for being male sounds pretty toxic to me. The audacity of these men mansplaining my own relationship to me. They have no idea what actually happened. Just making assumptions based on their own internalized misogyny. Decide to respond to Orion directly. I wasn't trying to change Chad's personality. I was helping him recognize unconscious biases that hurt women. If you experience accountability as personality change, that says more about you than me. Block both of them immediately. Don't need their toxic masculinity polluting my online spaces. As the evening winds down, Sarah helps me process the deeper implications. You know what this really shows? She says. It shows how much work we still have to do. Exactly. Chad had every opportunity to become a better ally, and he chose to return to his toxic patterns instead. And his friends are so threatened by feminist education that they had to create an elaborate celebration to mock it. It's actually kind of sad when you think about it. All that potential for growth, wasted. Realize that in many ways, this whole situation is a learning experience. I gave Chad every tool he needed to examine his privilege and challenge patriarchal conditioning. I created safe spaces for education and growth. I offered patient guidance through difficult concepts. If he chose to reject that opportunity, that reflects his character, not mine. You can lead a man to feminism, but you can't make him think. Before Sarah leaves, we talk about how to move forward. I think the most important thing is to not let this discourage you from expecting accountability in future relationships, she says. You're right. I won't lower my standards just because Chad couldn't rise to meet them. Exactly. There are men out there who actually want to do the work. Men who see feminist education as an opportunity, not a burden. After Sarah leaves, I scroll through the photos one more time, trying to understand how someone could celebrate throwing away growth like this. See Chad in his recently paroled shirt, laughing with friends who think accountability is imprisonment. Realize that I actually feel sorry for him. He had a chance to develop genuine feminist consciousness, to examine his privilege and work toward dismantling oppressive systems. Instead, he chose to return to the comfortable ignorance of toxic masculinity. Think about all the energy I invested in our weekly discussion groups, carefully curating readings that would challenge their assumptions, creating discussion questions that would spark meaningful reflection, providing snacks and comfortable seating to make learning accessible. And they experienced it as homework, as burden, as punishment, when it was actually a gift, free education about concepts that would make them better humans. Remember how excited I was when Chad would occasionally engage thoughtfully, like the time he actually read the Audre Lorde essay I assigned, and came to discussion group with genuine questions about intersectionality. I thought he was finally starting to understand. Apparently it was just performative engagement to keep me happy. The growth wasn't real. It was manipulation. Feel a wave of sadness thinking about all the potential that was wasted. Chad could have become a real ally. Someone who understood the difference between intention and impact. Someone who recognized his privilege without getting defensive. Someone who could sit with discomfort in service of growth. Instead, he chose the easy path back to unconscious oppression. But then I remember Sarah's words about not getting discouraged. This experience taught me important lessons about setting boundaries, about recognizing when someone is genuinely committed to growth versus just going through the motions, about the difference between men who want to develop feminist consciousness and men who just want to avoid conflict. Realize that Chad's friends celebrating his freedom actually proves everything I was trying to teach him. Their response shows how deeply invested they are in maintaining patriarchal systems, how threatened they feel by women who expect accountability, how they'll go to elaborate lengths to mock and dismiss feminist education. The prison metaphors are particularly telling. They experience accountability as imprisonment. They see privilege examination as punishment. They think learning about oppression is torture, when actually it's the foundation of meaningful social change. Decide to write one final text to Chad, not because I expect him to understand, but because I need to say it. I hope someday you realize that everything I asked of you was designed to make you a better person and a better partner. The fact that your friends are celebrating your return to unconscious bias says everything about why this work was necessary. I genuinely hope you find the courage to examine yourself honestly someday. Send it and then block his number. Don't need any more gaslighting or defensive responses. He made his choice when he chose his toxic friend group over personal growth. I can't force someone to evolve if they're not ready. Feel a strange sense of closure looking at the photos one more time. Yes, it hurts that 2 years of emotional labor was wasted. Yes, it's disappointing that Chad chose comfort over consciousness. But ultimately, this experience confirmed everything I believe about patriarchal conditioning. These men threw a party because their friend no longer has to think critically about his behavior. They celebrated the return of mansplaining and manspreading. They rejoice that he won't have to acknowledge his privilege anymore. They're literally cheering for unconsciousness and oppression. If that doesn't prove the necessity of feminist education, I don't know what does. Their reaction validates every method I used. Every boundary I set. Every expectation I held. Every lesson I tried to teach. They're so threatened by accountability that they had to turn it into a joke. Realize that Chad's friends actually did me a favor. They showed me exactly who he really is underneath all the performative wokeness. Someone who experiences growth as oppression. Someone who sees feminist education as imprisonment. Someone who chooses toxic masculinity when given the choice. I deserve a partner who sees privilege examination as necessary, not burdensome. Someone who welcomes accountability instead of celebrating its absence. Someone who understands that real love includes challenging each other to be better. Look at the photos one last time. Chad laughing with his orange jumpsuit crew. Orion raising his beer in a toast to ignorance. Marcus grinning as he cuts the chain cake. All of them celebrating the end of consciousness and the return to comfortable oppression. Close my laptop and pour another glass of wine. Tomorrow, I'll start looking for someone who actually wants to do the work. Someone who sees feminist theory discussion as date night, not detention. Someone who understands that acknowledging privilege is basic human decency. Someone who recognizes that real freedom comes from examining yourself honestly, not from avoiding accountability. Chad can have his freedom party. I'll have my integrity. And honestly, looking at those photos of grown men in prisoner costumes celebrating the ability to mansplain without consequences, I think I got the better deal.